Detective Anna Miller sat at the head of the interrogation table, her eyes locked on the man sitting across from her. His name was James Donovan, a suspect in a string of robberies that had plagued the city for weeks. He wasn't the type of criminal who stood out, but something about him had been nagging at Anna ever since they pulled him in for questioning. James was average in every sense. Unremarkable height, average build, messy brown hair, and a face that blended easily into the background, yet he was hiding something. Anna could feel it, like a dark cloud hovering just out of reach, but she wasn't alone. Next to Anna, on the other side of the table, sat a silent yet ever-present figure. Max, the German shepherd, his fur sleek and his eyes intelligent, sat perfectly still, observing James with an almost unnerving intensity. Max wasn't just any dog. He had been trained for years to assist in interrogations, his keen senses and ability to read human emotions unparalleled. And there was something else about him, something the team had only recently begun to understand. Max had an uncanny ability to detect lies. "All right, James," Anna began, her voice calm but firm. "We know you've been involved in the recent string of robberies. What we don't know is why. You're not like the others we've caught. You're smarter than that. So tell me what happened. I'm listening." James shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his eyes darting to Max for a split second before he quickly looked away. His fingers twitched nervously, and he began to sweat, despite the cool temperature in the room. I don't know what you're talking about," he muttered, his voice shaking. "I haven't done anything wrong." Anna didn't react, but Max's ears perked up, and he slowly shifted his gaze from James to Anna, as if to say, "I can tell he's lying." Anna glanced at Max and then back at James, maintaining her composure. "James, you're lying," she said simply. "Max here can tell when people are lying, and right now he knows you're not telling the truth." James froze, his eyes widening. It wasn't that he didn't believe in dogs. They were loyal, protective, and intelligent. But he didn't know how Max worked. He had heard rumors about the dog's abilities, but he hadn't given them much thought. I'm not lying," he stammered, his voice more desperate now. "I haven't stolen anything, I swear." Max let out a low growl, his posture becoming more alert. Anna's heart skipped a beat. She knew Max's growls weren't random. He was a well-trained canine, and when he growled, it wasn't just a sign of irritation, it was a warning that something darker was at play. "You're lying, James," Anna repeated. "Max doesn't miss a thing, he can feel it. When you're hiding something, and right now, he's telling me that you're not being honest." James's gaze darted nervously around the room. Sweat beaded on his forehead. He shifted in his seat, looking more and more uncomfortable with every passing second. It wasn't just the interrogation that was getting to him. Something else was weighing on him, something deeper. "Okay," James finally said, his voice trembling. "Okay, fine. I did it. I did the robberies. But I wasn't stealing for myself. I didn't want the money. It's not what you think." Anna leaned forward slightly, intrigued. "What do you mean? Why did you do it then?" James looked up at her, his eyes wild. "You have to understand. I was forced to. They made me do it. They threatened me. They made me take the money and deliver it." Anna's brow furrowed. Who made you do this?" James hesitated, his face twisting in fear. I can't say. They'll kill me if I do." Max growled again, louder this time, a deep rumbling sound that filled the room. It was a sound that didn't belong in a place like this. Anna noticed his body was tense, every muscle alert. "Max is telling me you're still lying, James," Anna said, her voice low. "You're holding back something important. What are you afraid of?" For the first time, a flicker of something almost like dread crossed James's face. His lips parted, but no words came out. He looked at Max, then at Anna, his eyes wide, as though the answer to her question was something too terrifying to speak aloud. Max's growl turned into a sharp bark. His head snapped toward the door of the interrogation room, his ears flat. Against his skull, there was something out there, a presence that Anna couldn't feel, but Max was sensing. His instincts were warning her, and she trusted them more than anything. Anna looked back at James, her voice hardening. "Tell me, James, what are you afraid of?" "I can't," James whispered, his voice breaking. "You don't understand. If I tell you, it's all over. It's already too late." Before Anna could press further, the door to the interrogation room burst open. A man in a black suit stood in the doorway, his eyes scanning the room coldly. He wasn't alone. Behind him, two more men stepped into the room, each one wearing dark, professional clothing and exuding an air of quiet menace. "Anna Miller," the man in the suit said, his voice smooth and controlled. "I think it's time we end this little session." Anna's heart raced. She had been trained for this, but what she hadn't been trained for was the bone-chilling sense that this wasn't a normal interrogation anymore. The air had shifted, become heavier, as if something insidious had entered the room. Max's growl turned into a full-on bark, louder and more vicious now. His body trembled with the force of it, as if he were trying to warn Anna of the danger she had just stepped into. "Who are you?" Anna demanded, standing up from her chair. "What do you want with him?" The man in the suit smiled, though there was no warmth in it. "We want nothing more than what's ours. You should leave this alone, detective. You have no idea what you're dealing with." James's face paled. His eyes darted from the men to Anna and back again, the truth spilling from his lips in a rush. "They're not just criminals. They're something else. They're part of a cult, a group that controls everything from the shadows, and they've been using me, using all of us, to get what they need." Anna's stomach, it dropped. She had suspected the truth was darker than she'd anticipated, but this was beyond anything she could have imagined. Before she could react, the man in the suit stepped forward, a look of finality in his eyes. "We're taking him with us," the man said, "and you, Detective Miller, would do well to forget everything you've heard tonight." Max barked. Again, his teeth bared, but Anna was frozen in place, her thoughts racing. They were in danger. James, the men, even Max. Everyone was caught in something far bigger and more terrifying than a mere robbery ring, and they were running out of time. The door slammed shut with an unsettling finality. Anna's heart pounded in her chest, adrenaline flooding her system. Her thoughts raced faster than she could follow, piecing together fragments of the conversation, trying to make sense of what James had just revealed. A cult? A shadowy group, controlling everything from the dark corners of society. Max stood at attention beside her, his body tense, eyes never leaving the men who had just entered the room. His growl had softened, but not disappeared. His instincts were still on high alert, sensing the presence of something far more dangerous than Anna had first realized. "Max," she murmured under her breath, her hand brushing his fur for reassurance. She could feel the weight of the situation settling over her like a heavy cloak. They weren't just dealing with petty criminals. They were dealing with something much larger, something far more dangerous. The man in the suit, his name was Donovan, as she now realized, stepped closer to her, his cold eyes scanning her face as if trying to read her every thought. "You should have stayed away, detective," he said in that calm, menacing voice that sent a chill down her spine. "But now that you're involved, there's no turning back." Anna's pulse quickened. "Who are you people?" she demanded, her voice steady despite the fear that coiled in her chest. "What is this cult you're talking about, and why? Is James involved?" Donovan didn't respond immediately. Instead, he glanced at the two men who had entered with him. Both were tall, muscular, and exuded an air of quiet menace. They were armed, but not with the usual police-style handguns. No, these men were holding something far more specialized. Anna's mind raced, trying to process the implications of what she was seeing. Finally, Donovan spoke again, his tone dripping with disdain. James was just a pawn detective. He's not the only one. We've been working in the shadows for years, quietly pulling strings, controlling things from behind the scenes. This town, this city, even the government, you don't even know how deep it goes. Anna's mind spun as she tried to take it all in. A criminal empire that extended into every corner of society. A cult manipulating people like puppets. The pieces weren't fitting together neatly. The investigation she had thought was simple had spiraled into a nightmare, far beyond anything she could have imagined. Why target James? Anna asked, her eyes flicking to the door, as if expecting another wave of men to flood the room. Why use him for your crimes? Donovan's smile remained unchanged, but there was a flicker of something dark in his eyes. James wasn't the first. He was one of many. A cog in a machine that's much, much bigger. He was part of a setup just like the others. And he's a perfect example of the kind of person we recruit. We find those who have the potential to be more than they seem, those who can be easily controlled, and we offer them a way out of their miserable lives, a place in something greater. Anna's stomach churned. The manipulation, the control, it all sounded so calculated, so precise. She could almost see the network of lies, of twisted promises forming around James like a cage. "I'm not afraid of you," Anna said, her voice tightening with defiance. She took a step forward, her hand resting on the edge of the table. "And I'm not going to stop until I get the answers I need." Donovan raised an eyebrow, as if he were amused by her bravado. But it wasn't amusement that lingered in his expression. It was something darker, something far more dangerous. He took a slow step toward her, his movements deliberate. "You have no idea what you're dealing with, detective," he said softly. "You're in over your head. You can't just pull a thread like this and expect everything to stay in place. This isn't a simple case. It's a war. And you're playing a very dangerous game." Max's growl deepened, a low rumble that vibrated through the floor. He wasn't just growling at Donovan or his men, he was growling at something far beyond them, something that Anna could feel too now. The air in the room had shifted, thickening with the weight of danger, and Max, always the perceptive one, was warning her that whatever was coming, it was going to be much worse than she thought. Anna's thoughts flashed back to James's last words, the cryptic warning that something terrible was coming. Was it too late? Had she already stepped too far into the darkness to find her way back? Before she could ask another question, Donovan turned away, signaling his men. Without a word, the two men moved swiftly toward the door, leaving Anna and Max alone in the room, but not truly alone. Anna could feel the oppressive presence of something far greater than just a few men in dark suits. Max's ears flicked backward, his gaze still fixed on the door. He was waiting, as if expecting something, and then, as if on cue, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway. Anna's instincts flared. "Stay close, Max," she murmured. Max obeyed, stepping closer to her side, his fur brushing against her leg as they both faced the door. The footsteps grew louder, drawing closer, and then suddenly they stopped. A shadow loomed in the doorway. Max tensed, his body coiling like a spring, ready to react. Anna's heart thudded in her chest. Her hand slid under the table to the gun holstered at her side. She wasn't ready to back down, not now. But whoever was behind that door was a threat, and she had no idea how many of them there were. The door creaked open slowly. Anna's breath caught in her throat as a figure stepped into the room. It was James. But there was something different about him. His eyes were wide, almost unrecognizable, and his hands were trembling as he stepped forward. He wasn't alone. Another figure, cloaked in shadow, stood behind him, their face obscured. "James?" Anna called out cautiously, "What's going on? What are you doing here?" James looked at her, his face pale and drawn, as if he hadn't slept in days. His voice trembled. "I had to come back. They're coming for you. They know. You're close. You have to run. Now." Max's growl deepened, and Anna felt a chill crawl down her spine. She couldn't trust him, not anymore. But it was too late. The door slammed shut behind him, and everything went dark. The door slammed shut behind James, echoing through the small interrogation room like a final warning. Anna's pulse raced, her body tensing instinctively as she looked from James to the shadowy figure who had followed him in. Max, ever alert, let out a low growl, his body stiffening with unease. Anna's hand tightened around the grip of her gun, but she didn't draw it. Not yet. James, though visibly shaken, wasn't the threat, at least not in the way she had feared. It was the man standing behind him, cloaked in darkness, that filled her with a sense of impending doom. "James," Anna said, trying to keep her voice steady despite the rising tide of panic. "What's happening? Why did you come back?" James's eyes darted nervously from the shadowy figure to Anna. He looked like a man caught between two worlds, torn between something he didn't understand and the reality of the danger he was in. His lips trembled as he tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. "They're watching you," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "They know what you're trying to do. I had to come back. Max suddenly lunged forward, teeth bared, his growl becoming a full-throated snarl. The figure in the doorway flinched, his dark silhouette becoming more menacing as Max's protective instincts kicked in. Anna's heart skipped a beat. The way Max reacted, it wasn't just fear, it was pure, raw terror. "Max, no!" Anna commanded sharply, her voice firm as she reached for the dog's collar, pulling him back. Max's growl still reverberated in the air, his body coiled and ready to strike. The figure in the doorway remained still, but Anna could feel the tension in the room tightening with each passing second. James seemed to shrink in on himself, stepping back as if trying to escape the invisible force that surrounded them. "They've been following me," James continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "You have no idea how deep it goes. This isn't just a group of criminals, it's a network, a web that's reached into every part of this town. The police, the politicians, the media, it's all connected. It's bigger than you think." Anna's mind raced. The pieces James had given her were scattered, and the more she tried to put them together, the more the picture became blurred, distorted. A conspiracy like this, one that had infiltrated every level of society, was nearly impossible to fight against. But she couldn't stop now. She was too close. She stepped forward cautiously, her eyes never leaving James. "Who's that with you?" she demanded, her tone sharp but controlled. "Who is this man?" James swallowed hard, his gaze shifting back to the figure behind him. The man didn't move, didn't speak, but there was something in the air now, a palpable threat that seemed to press in on all sides. "He's one of them," James said, barely able to meet her eyes. "They've been watching me for months. They knew I was getting close to exposing them. I didn't have a choice. I had to come back to warn you." Anna's fingers hovered over the gun, but she kept it holstered. She had to stay calm. She had to think. James had just admitted he'd been manipulated, used as a pawn in whatever game this was. But that didn't explain why he'd come back now. Why risk everything to warn her? "Why didn't you just leave?" she asked, her voice quiet. "Why come back to me? Why now?" James looked haunted, his eyes wide with the weight of some unspoken truth. "Because they've already marked you. You've been following the trail too closely. If they're watching you, they're watching everyone who's close to you. And you're about to be in more danger than you can imagine." Anna's heart thudded painfully in her chest. This was no longer about one person or one murder. It was about an entire system, a network that stretched farther and deeper than she had ever realized. They were after her. But why? Before she could respond, the shadowy figure in the doorway stepped forward, his movements fluid and predatory. He was taller than James, with sharp, calculating eyes that seemed to pierce through her. He didn't speak, but his presence was enough to make Anna's breath catch in her throat. James flinched at the movement, but the man didn't acknowledge him. His gaze was fixed solely on Anna, assessing her, reading her every move. Then finally he spoke in a voice so cold it sent a shiver down her spine. "You're getting too close, detective," he said, his tone almost bored. "You should have stopped while you still had the chance." Anna's hand clenched around the grip of her gun. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice low but fierce. "What do you want with me?" The man stepped closer, his shadow casting an eerie presence over the room. "What we want is simple," he said, his lips curling into something that could have been a smile but wasn't. "We want control. We want everything, and we'll do whatever it takes to get it." Anna felt the weight of his words settling into her bones. This wasn't just a group of criminals. This was something far worse. This was a power play on a scale she couldn't comprehend. A conspiracy that had already infected every level of authority, from the lowest streets to the highest offices. Max's hackles were raised, his body coiled, ready to act. But Anna held him back, her eyes never leaving the figure in front of her. This wasn't the time to act. Not yet. "You're going to tell me everything," Anna said, her voice firm despite the cold fear gnawing at her. "And you're going to tell me now, or I'll make you." The man laughed, the sound dark and hollow. "You really think you can stop this?" he sneered. "You're just a small part of a much bigger game. You can't stop it. You can't fight us." Anna's heart pounded, but she stood her ground. "I don't need to stop it. I just need to expose it." The man took a slow step back, his eyes narrowing. "You think you're the first one to try?" A flicker of understanding passed between him and James, something that made Anna's blood run cold. James was in deeper than she had realized. The entire town, the entire system, had been infected. This wasn't just a local crime ring, it was an organized conspiracy. The man in front of her took another step back, his eyes lingering on Anna for a moment longer before he turned toward the door. "We'll be seeing you soon, detective," he said over his shoulder, his voice carrying a promise of something far more sinister. "You'll wish you hadn't gotten involved." Anna's breath hitched as she reached for Max's collar, pulling him back as the figure slipped out of the room. "James," she said, her voice desperate, "tell me everything, now." But James had already turned away, his eyes haunted with the weight of secrets he couldn't keep hidden any longer. Anna stood in the stillness of the interrogation room, the tension thick in the air. The door had closed behind the shadowy figure, with a finality that made her stomach churn. She turned to James, who was visibly trembling. His face was pale, his hands shaking as he clutched the edge of the table. The air felt charged, heavy with the unsaid, and Anna couldn't ignore the feeling that they had just crossed into dangerous territory. Max, ever alert, sat beside Anna, his eyes trained on James. The dog could sense something too, the fear, the weight of the secret that James had been carrying for so long. Anna could almost hear Max's low growl, a sound so subtle it was barely audible, but it mirrored the unease that had settled in her chest. James looked up at her, his eyes wide with the haunted look of someone who had seen too much. He opened, his mouth to speak, but the words faltered, caught in the web of his own fear. Anna waited, patient but unyielding. She needed answers, and she needed them now. "James," she said quietly, her voice steady but firm, "tell me everything." James's eyes flickered to the door, his body trembling. I didn't mean for any of this to happen," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I thought I was just helping. I didn't know." Anna took a step closer, her presence grounding him. "Helping who? What's going on here, James? What did that man mean when he said you were marked?" He swallowed hard, his hands shaking as he gripped the edge of the table even tighter. "I was a part of it," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know at first, but I found out. I found out too much." Anna's heart raced, but she kept her voice calm, her words measured. Too much of what? James hesitated, his eyes darting nervously around the room, as if the walls themselves were listening. "There's a group," he began, his voice faltering. "A powerful group. They've infiltrated everything. The police, the media, the government, everyone. They've been pulling the strings for years, controlling everything from the shadows." Anna's mind raced, her thoughts spinning as she tried to process what he was saying. She'd suspected as much, but hearing it from James, hearing the tremor in his voice, made it all too real. "They've been watching me," James continued, his voice growing weaker. "I started asking questions. Too many questions. I found out about the disappearances, the corruption, the money laundering, everything, but they don't want the truth to get out. And now, they're after me. After both of us." Anna's heart skipped a beat. "After both of us?" James nodded, his eyes wide with fear. "They know you're involved now. They've been watching you too, ever since you started investigating. They won't stop until you're gone." Anna's mind whirled. This wasn't just a criminal syndicate. This was something far more insidious, far more dangerous. The people she'd been investigating, the disappearances, the murders, the corruption, were all connected, and now they were coming for her. "Why did you come back?" Anna asked, her voice hoarse with emotion. "Why didn't you just leave?" James's face twisted with guilt. "I didn't know where else to go. I thought I could help, that I could stop them before it was too late. But now I've made it worse. They're going to kill us both." Anna's eyes narrowed. "I'm not going to let that happen." Max growled low again, his hackles raised as the door to the interrogation room suddenly creaked open. Anna spun around, her hand instinctively going to her gun. But it wasn't the shadowy figure. It was Officer Matthews, his face pale and filled with urgency. "Detective," he said, his voice shaking. "We've got a problem. The mayor, he's gone, disappeared." Anna's stomach dropped. The mayor, one of the key players in the conspiracy James had warned her about. It wasn't just a threat anymore. It was real. The pieces were all falling into place. "Gone?" Anna asked, her mind racing. "What do you mean, gone?" Matthews shook his head, looking like he was on the verge of panic. "He was here in his office earlier today, but now his office is empty. There's no sign of him, and his phone's been disconnected. The entire city's in chaos." Anna's mind spun, her thoughts racing faster than she could keep up. "This is it," she murmured. "They're making their move." James looked horrified. "They've taken him," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "They've taken the mayor." Anna turned back to Matthews, her voice sharp and commanding. "And we need to find him, now, and we need to find out who's behind this, all of it." Matthews nodded, but his hesitation was evident. "Where do we start?" Anna's eyes flickered to James. "We start with him," she said, her tone resolute. "He's the key to everything." The door to the interrogation room slammed shut behind them as Anna, Max, and James made their way out into the hall. Matthews led the way, his face grim, his footsteps echoing in the silence of the empty precinct. But as they reached the stairwell, Anna's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, glancing at the screen. A single text message from an unknown number. "You should have stopped. It's too late now." Anna's blood ran cold. The words were a clear warning, but who had sent it? She looked at James, her heart pounding in her chest. "We're not alone in this anymore," she said, her voice steady but filled with dread. "Whoever's behind this, they know we're coming, and they're ready." The chilling text message hung over Anna's thoughts like a shadow, its ominous warning gnawing at her resolve. They weren't just up against corrupt officials or a criminal syndicate. Whoever was behind this had been watching them, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Anna felt the weight of that realization pressing down on her chest, and with it, the knowledge that time was running out. She glanced at James, who had grown pale in the face of this new threat. The guilt that had been in his eyes earlier was now overshadowed by a deep fear of the unknown, of the consequences of his involvement. But there was no turning back now. Anna had already committed herself to this, and she wouldn't stop until the truth was exposed. "We need to move fast," Anna said, her voice low but steady. "Matthews, get the mayor's office on lockdown. Get a team together and start searching." Matthews nodded, but Anna could see the doubt in his eyes. He was just as scared as the rest of them, but there was no time for hesitation. As they walked through the dimly lit hallway of the precinct, Anna's mind raced. The mayor's disappearance wasn't just a random event. It was the culmination of everything they had been investigating: the missing people, the corruption, the power structures that had been secretly pulling the strings behind the scenes. And now the mayor was gone, but there was something else that Anna couldn't shake: the message. "It's too late now." That phrase wasn't just a warning, it was a threat. Someone was watching their every move, someone who was far more powerful than they had realized. Anna pushed the thought aside. Focus. They couldn't afford distractions now. They reached the parking garage, and Anna felt a surge of urgency. They had to find the mayor, now. As soon as they reached the car, she turned to James, her voice unwavering. "Where is he?" she demanded. "Where do we start?" James looked lost for a moment, his eyes darting around as if he were searching for answers in the air. Then he finally spoke, his voice trembling. "The old warehouse. It's on the outskirts of town, near the docks. That's where they do the deals, where they make things disappear." Anna didn't hesitate. She motioned for Matthews to lead the way, and they all piled into the car. Max, as always, sat silently in the back, his piercing gaze never leaving the road ahead. His sharp senses were attuned to something beyond their understanding, something that only he could detect. The drive to the warehouse was quick, but every minute stretched out like an eternity. The snow had started to fall again, blanketing the streets with a quiet, foreboding calm. The world outside seemed eerily still, as if holding its breath in anticipation. As they pulled up to the warehouse, Anna's stomach twisted in knots. The building loomed ahead, dark, silent and abandoned. The faintest light glowed from a crack in the shuttered door. No one else seemed to be around, and the quiet felt unnatural. "Stay close," Anna whispered, her eyes scanning the surroundings. "We don't know what we're walking into." They approached the door cautiously, Anna's hand on her gun, her senses heightened. James walked beside her, his face a mix of fear and regret. Max's ears were pricked, his posture tense as he led the way, his nose twitching in the cold night air. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit interior. The smell of rust and old wood filled the air, and the shadows seemed to stretch long and menacing. As they stepped inside, Anna's instinct screamed at her to turn back, but there was no time. They were already here. Inside the warehouse, it was eerily quiet. The only sound was the distant hum of machinery muffled by the thick walls. Anna's eyes darted to every corner, searching for signs of movement, but there was nothing. Just silence. And then, from the darkness, a voice echoed through the vast space. "You shouldn't have come!" Anna's heart skipped a beat as she whipped around to face the source of the voice. Standing in the shadows, bathed in the dim light, was a man, a figure she recognized instantly. "Damon," she muttered, her voice tight with shock. Damon Wells, the very man she had suspected of being at the heart of the conspiracy, stood before her. His face was cold, expressionless, but his eyes glinted with something far more dangerous. "I was hoping you'd show up," Damon said, stepping forward with deliberate calm. "You've been poking around in places you don't belong, Detective." Anna's hand tightened on her gun, but she didn't draw it. She had to stay focused. "Where's the mayor?" she demanded, her voice sharp. "What have you done with him?" Damon's lips curled into a cruel smile. "The mayor's gone. He was never really part of the plan. He was just a distraction, a pawn." Anna's mind raced. She had known the mayor wasn't entirely innocent. But this was something else entirely. "You're part of this, aren't you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Damon's smile widened. "Of course, all these years, pulling the strings, controlling the city from the shadows, and you've been getting too close, Anna, too close to the truth." Before she could respond, a loud crash echoed from the far side of the warehouse. Max, who had been standing silently at her side, suddenly sprang into action. He barked furiously, his body tense, and charged toward the noise. "Max, no!" Anna shouted, but it was too late. The German shepherd barreled into the darkness, his growls echoing off the walls. Damon's expression darkened. "You think you can stop this?" he sneered, taking a step forward. "You've already lost." Anna's blood ran cold. "Not yet," she spat, her voice filled with determination. Suddenly, the sound of running footsteps interrupted their standoff. Max emerged from the shadows, dragging a man in a chokehold. It was the mayor, pale, bloodied, but alive. Anna rushed forward, relief flooding through her. "Get him out of here," she ordered Matthews, who immediately sprang into action, helping. The mayor to his feet, Damon's face twisted in fury as he watched his carefully constructed empire begin to crumble. He lunged toward Anna, but before he could reach her, Max was on him, teeth bared. "Get back!" Anna shouted, but it was too late. Max's powerful jaws locked onto Damon's arm, and the man screamed in agony. In the chaos that followed, Matthews restrained Damon while Anna rushed to the mayor's side. "We need to get out of here now," she urged, helping him toward the door. Max, now standing protectively beside Anna, let out a low growl, his eyes still fixed on Damon. As they made their way back to the car, Anna couldn't help but think about everything they had uncovered, the lies, the corruption, the power games that had ruined lives. But now, with Damon in custody and the mayor alive, there was hope. The truth would come out, and the people responsible for the suffering would be held accountable. As they drove away from the warehouse, Anna glanced at James, who was sitting in the back seat, his eyes filled with a mixture of exhaustion and relief. "Are you ready for the truth?" she asked him quietly. James nodded, his voice thick with emotion. "I think I'm ready." And with that, the case was closed. The conspiracy was exposed, but Anna knew that the battle wasn't over. The truth was out, but the consequences would continue to unfold. As for Max, the German shepherd, who had helped them every step of the way, he remained a silent sentinel beside her, her protector, her partner, and together they would face whatever came next.